This is for the leaders, the visionaries, the hope bringers, kindness instigators. This is your place to get loved, poured into, activated, and inspired. Good morning. Welcome to Fireside Friday. It's so good to be here with you. Friday, April 10th. Hope that you have had a great week. And whenever you're listening, or if you're here in the Zoom room, that you are um, ready to receive. The first thing I wanted all of us to really think about before I start pouring it out is to ask here in this moment, what are you hoping to receive today? Is there anything that your soul is craving or asking for? Just take a moment and think about that. Is there anything that I'm seeking clarity on, making room for? If I could use a word about this, it would be, what do I hope I receive today? All right. And it could be just a word, it could just be rest. Maybe you just need a little rest. Um, Whatever it is, I'm excited to see how this meets you and where it finds a home in you. I actually want to start today by reading a story about a woman named Virginia Woolf. Virginia Hall. Virginia Hall is her name. I had never heard about Virginia, and actually, the post I'm going to read to you was written by an account called A Mighty Girl. I saw it on Facebook. I'm sure they have an Instagram presence. I've got two stories I'm going to be reading today, one at the beginning and one at the end, unless something changes in the flow and it feels like it needs to come forward sooner. But right now, I want us to talk about Virginia, and then we'll talk a little bit about where we're going. And I'm reading these because I think they're well written, and they also give a little more context than me just giving you a synopsis. And so here we go. And I will include the links in the show notes as well, unless you want to find the accounts or read these again. So this is about Virginia Hall. She is the most dangerous of all Allied spies. We must find and destroy her. That was the Gestapo's internal directive on a woman they knew only as the Limping Lady, a spy who had been operating behind enemy lines in occupied France for years, organizing resistance cells, smuggling down pilots to safety, and radioing German troop movements to London. They had Klaus Barbie hunting her. They had a composite sketch. What they didn't have was her name. It was Virginia Hall. She was an American, and her left leg was made of wood. Born on this day in 1906, so this was April 7th, to a wealthy Baltimore family, Hall was expected to marry into privilege and settle into the role of wife and mother. She wanted none of it, describing herself as cantankerous and capricious. She studied in Paris, fell in love with France, and decided she would become a diplomat, a field in which women held just six of 1,500 positions in the entire U.S. diplomatic corps. She applied and was rejected, applied again and was rejected again. She took a clerical post at the American Embassy in Warsaw, still hoping, when a hunting accident in Turkey cost her the lower half of her left leg. The State Department informed her that the amputation disqualified her permanently. She was left with a wooden prosthetic she would later name Cuthbert and a closed door. Undaunted, I'm sure she was a little daunted, okay? Hall moved to Paris in 1939 as Europe was being consumed by war and volunteered to drive ambulances for the French army, hauling wounded soldiers from the front lines while German fighter planes strafed overhead during the six-week Battle of France. After France's surrender, Hall made her way to London, where she caught the attention of an undercover agent who connected her with Winston Churchill's newly specialized and created Special Operations Executive. The SOE, so Special Operations Executive, the SOE had never sent a woman into the field. They had also spent 6 straight months failing to get a single agent into occupied France. They decided to send Hall. She arrived in Vichy, I'm sure that's not how you pronounce that, France, in August 1941, posing as a correspondent for the New York Post. In Lyon, she built a resistance network called Heckler from nothing, recruiting agents, gathering intelligence on German troop movements, running escape lines for downed British pilots, and coordinating sabotage operations across the region. She changed her appearance constantly and cycled through aliases, exploiting the one blind spot that the enemy couldn't see past. She was able to play on the chauvinism of the Gestapo, one historian observed. None of the Germans early in the war necessarily thought that a woman was capable of being a spy. Hall's effectiveness was so extraordinary that 12 months after she began working undercover, the SOE reversed its position entirely and began sending more women into the field. But the enemy was learning too. The Gestapo didn't know the limping lady's face, only a composite sketch and the limp. But they wanted her badly enough to put Klaus Barbie on her trail, the same interrogator who would later be awarded the Iron Cross for torturing and executing thousands of resistance fighters. Their internal communications left no ambiguity about the threat they believed she posed. When Germany seized control of all of France in November 1942, Hall was forced to flee. What followed was a 3 day journey on foot across the Pyrenees in heavy snow in winter, with a 7 pound wooden leg strapped to her body with a belt at the waist. Midway through the crossing, she radioed London that Cuthbert was causing problems. SOE headquarters, not recognizing the nickname for her prosthetic, replied with what may be the most unintentionally absurd message of the war. If Cuthbert is giving you difficulty, have him eliminated. When she arrived in Spain, she was arrested and imprisoned for illegally entering the country. It took 6 weeks before an inmate being released was able to get word to American officials in Barcelona about her presence so they could arrange her release. She finally made it back to London in January 1943, where she was quietly made an honorary member of the Order of the British Empire, the MBE. And when told she could not go back, it was too dangerous with her high profile, she went back anyway. Not for the British this time, for the Americans. She joined the Office of Strategic Services, which was just building its own intelligent operations in France. And for her second mission, she would further than ever to disappear. She sat in a London dentist's chair and had her teeth ground down so she would look like a French milkmaid instead of an American spy. In the hills of central France, disguised as an elderly woman tending goats, she went to work. And what she built was staggering. From barns and attics, constantly on the move to stay ahead of German signal tracking teams, she coordinated airdrops of weapons and supplies, reported troop movements to Allied command, and assembled a network that grew to 1,500 people. As D-Day approached, Hall was no longer just a spy, she was a guerrilla leader. She armed and trained the 3 battalions of French resistance fighters for the sabotage missions that helped pave the way for the Allied invasion. One of her radio dispatches captured the scope of what her teams accomplished. Bridges destroyed, freight trains derailed, a key rail line severed, telephone lines down. By the war's end, Virginia Hall had spent over 2 years operating undercover behind enemy lines at a time when the average life expectancy of an SOE radio operator in occupied France was 6 weeks. An official British government report at the end of the war summed her up in 2 words: amazingly successful. France awarded her the Croix de Guerre with Palm. The United States made her the only civilian woman in the entire war to receive the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second highest military honor for valor in combat. President Truman wanted a public ceremony. Hall declined. I am still operational, she told them, and most anxious to get busy. She joined the CIA at its founding and worked in intelligence until she retired in 1966, a career spent almost entirely in the shadows by choice. She rarely spoke about what she had done. Many of my friends, she once explained, were killed for talking too much. Even years after the war, Hall took quiet pride in her service, though she always maintained a wry sense of humor about the extraordinary life she had lived. Her response to receiving the Distinguished Service Cross? Not bad for a girl from Baltimore. I would say not bad for a girl from anywhere or for a person. For a person. One of the things that kept coming through for me this week, and as I was sitting with what we are leaning into as a collective right now, is how important it is for us to continue being ourselves, finding that inner magic that we are and leaning into the magic that we bring because we are here. I was talking actually this week in a call about the origination world, a word of weird. Weird, actually, the original form of weird was spelled WYRD, and it actually originally meant destiny. Destiny, your weirdness, those things about you that you feel like, I don't know, others might not understand, or maybe you're learning or growing inside of, is part of what you're here to bring and impart. It is part of how you bloom and blossom in the flower, just as you were created, as your soul is craving to do. One of the other things that has really been percolating in my mind this week too is I watched this video. It was a transmission from Bashar, if you're familiar with him. And he was just talking about how healing, so often healing is not about what you say to another person. It's not about having the right words. It's not about bringing the right process. It's more about healing happens at a frequency of alignment, of authentic alignment. So when our soul is in authenticity, when we are vibrating highest, when we are following our expansion, we invite others to rise to that frequency just by being with them. And that is a choice if someone wants to rise and match that. This is why also we're drawn to the people that we are. This is why we are feeling pulled. We might have multiple people teaching something very similar, but there is a resonance about someone for us that draws us in. And I find this really fascinating because so much of our I think about our world, at least in the West, has been based on performance, wanting to get it right. And I really believe that women really leaning into an understanding that we actually are the most powerful when we are our most ourselves, when we bring the medicine that we literally are in the frequency that we bring. This is why it's really important to follow that expansion that you feel, even if we think that our weird might make us be misunderstood, especially for me, family of origin, from my background, things that, again, we might be saying really similar things, but knowing and understanding that my family may not understand the things that I'm here to bring. And also, they might. Our medicine might also be triggering for people. It might also be that we're holding up a mirror inside of our dysfunctional systems, family, culture, whatever that looks like, because we are inside of systems that need complete regeneration, which is one of the things that I think is so fascinating too, is that even in our reproductive systems as women, we carry regenerative power. Our period blood carries stem cells, and every single month that we shed that lining, our womb regenerates itself. And that period blood is antifungal, antimicrobial. and what is the other one? Antibacterial. So it's the blood from our period is literally healing with something too. I think that many of us have been told is dirty or we should hide it away. But really, in all actuality, it is something so special about the systems that we carry. I also heard this week that period blood is so powerful and potent with those stem cells that if you were to put it on a wound, that it would heal that wound within 24 hours. Again, I haven't tested this, so I don't know. But it sounds beautiful to really sit with and understand that even in our very bodies, without doing anything else, we bring a regenerative healing all in of itself. And the more that I spend time watching and observing relationships in my life, so often I see women bringing healing into their marriages, into lives with their children, into the communities that we're inside of. And one of the things we're going to start to continue seeing is this shift out of this patriarchal lens into a matriarchal. And one of the reasons, or one of the ways I think that this has to take root or gets to take root, is by us remembering the power that we have in just being who we are. And part of that is just simply and profoundly and exquisitely and beautifully that we are women. And I really came from a tradition that really minimized women, that tried to push us to the side, that tried to say that we don't have the same kind of abilities and giftings that men have. And I see that in a lot of our systems, not just the one I came out of. And I still think that we are repairing and rewilding and remembering the power that we truly are and have to bring to the world. Again, just in being ourselves, just in doing the things that we crave to do in just the way that we long to do them, when we are also frustrated inside of the office spaces that we're in, the workshops that we're attending, the things that we're seeing around us offered, and we think, I just want a different way. You are that different way. How would you like to do it? Where would you like to go? Leave the building, go to the woods, take people outside of the environment you see that is stifling them and put them somewhere that you believe is going to bring healing and maybe that you have seen healing yourself. This is one of the reasons I think nature also is so profound for us and is so healing. I mean, there's so many scientific ways that it is, but when we think about being at the frequency of authenticity as healing, a tree is a tree. It is authentically being itself. It is not asking to be anything else. It's not ashamed. At least I don't think they're ashamed of how they look, of how they've grown. I don't know. I haven't asked. And that's something too that I have started to do too, is try to really be present and ask and communicate because we are all part of this system. We are nature. We are nature. We are part of the natural world. We are not separate from it. That's another thing too, which kind of leads me actually to my other story that I wanted us to hear again about Rosemary Rutherford. And so this one is more about theology. I saw this in the last couple weeks and really feel like, again, it's a profound story to be told. And I think this is another thing too to consider and think about is how often we have not been able to hear women's stories and how they have effectively and often like gigantically changed the systems that we're inside of because women kept going. They kept pursuing, even when it was daunting. I love that line, undaunted. She did this thing. I bet she was daunted. It's okay if we're feeling frustrated. It's okay if we're feeling like we don't know the way. That's, in my opinion, in my experience, it's not really my role. My role really isn't to know the way. It is to live the way, whatever that means, where my expansion goes, where that authenticity leads me. That is my beacon. That is the thing that keeps pulling me and pushing me and guiding me forward. And that doesn't mean that there's not fear. There has been so much fear. There has been so much resistance in a lot of different capacities. I was been reading through journals this week and going through some of my own history. And 2 years ago, I was writing about things that I've been feeling, but was too scared to say. And so it took the liberation of that. It took the time with me. It took really drawing near. And at some point, my authenticity won out over my fear. I think that's part of the goal too, is that it's okay to be scared. We all are scared. We all have these these wonderings. What if people don't like me? What if they don't come? What if they don't buy the thing? What if they don't do this thing, this beautiful thing that I'm longing to bring to the table? That's okay. And each and every iteration of what we are offering is still teaching us along the way. It is still part of a divine dance that we're doing, that we're always receiving information about what we like, what we don't like, the aspects that we really thrived inside of, and the aspects that we didn't. Again, so many of us have been taught about leadership and the lens of leadership through the eyes of a man. And so much of that patriarchal stuff is about performance. It is about hierarchy. It is about keeping things, from a perspective that, at least from my own interpretation, is above reproach, is we're looking for doctrine. What are the rules? What is the system? The way of the feminine is far more wild. It is far more mysterious. It asks you to lean inward, to go where it's a little hazy, where it's a little dark, and lean into it and trust that your instinctual knowing will guide you, that you will have what you need, that you will be given the clues, the invitations, the right person at the right time, and really and truly just trusting that process of falling into it. Because again, we're going to go through this life with a lot of uncertainty regardless. There are a lot of ways that we cannot prepare or know what's to come, yet we can still instill and lean into and be with and in relationship to our own inner knowing, our own internal wiring, to follow that authenticity and trust that it's going to lead us through, even when things feel uncertain, even when we get shaken. Those things for us are still always there. So let's hear about Rosemary Radford Ruther. For 2,000 years, the church said women's silence was God's law. So she dug through history and found proof they were lying. In the 1960s, while church authorities insisted women's subordination was biblical truth, one scholar started asking a question that would shake 2 millennia of doctrine. What if the evidence proves otherwise? Rosemary Radford Ruther was a theologian who refused to accept easy answers. She looked at Christianity's power structures and saw something everyone else had normalized. Half the human population systemically locked out of leadership. Their voices erased from sacred spaces, their contributions buried under centuries of institutional amnesia. But she didn't just complain about inequality, she went digging. What Rosemary unearthed was explosive. In the earliest Christian communities, before empire and hierarchy calcified into doctrine, women had been everywhere. Teachers, prophets, leaders, apostles. The archaeological record showed it. Ancient letters confirmed it. Early church documents mentioned women in positions of authority that later generations of male church leaders had conveniently forgotten. Phoebe was called a deacon by Paul himself. Junia was named an apostle. Priscilla taught alongside her husband as an equal. Mary Magdalene was the first witness to the resurrection, the apostle to the apostles. For centuries, these women had been erased, minimized, or rewritten as mere helpers. Their leadership roles explained away, their authority denied. Rosemary held up the evidence like a mirror to the church and said, "Your own history betrays your rules. The Bible you claim mandates women's silence. actually shows women teaching, leading, and prophesying. The early church you romanticize as pure had women in positions of authority you now forbid. You didn't inherit these restrictions from Jesus or Paul, you created them later to consolidate male power. And now you're calling patriarchy biblical tradition. Then Rosemary went further. She recognized the same theological framework used to silence women was the exact blueprint used to justify ecological destruction, racial oppression, and economic exploitation. When you build a religious system that says domination is divinely ordained, you don't just create sexism, you create a permission structure for every form of injustice. The theology that says men should dominate women also says humans should dominate nature, leading to environmental catastrophe. White Christians should dominate other races, justifying colonialism and slavery. The wealthy should dominate the poor, blessing economic inequality. The West should dominate the rest, sanctifying imperialism. It all flows from the same poison well, a theology of domination disguised as God's will. Rosemary's scholarship became ammunition. People who'd been told they were less than, women pushed to the margins of their own churches, people of color told their oppression was God's plan. Anyone questioning religious authority suddenly had theological legitimacy to fight back. She gave them the language, the historical proof, the intellectual foundation to say, no, you're wrong, and here's why. Her book, Sexism and God Talk, Gaia and God, Women Church, became foundational text for feminist theology and liberation theology. She didn't just argue that the church should treat women better, she proved that excluding women contradicted Christianity's own origins. And the church had rewritten its history to justify patriarchy. And she connected women's oppression to every other form of injustice, showing how domination theology corrupts everything it touches. Church authorities hated it. Conservative theologians condemned her. She was attacked as a heretic, a radical, someone trying to destroy Christianity from within. But Rosemary wasn't trying to destroy Christianity. She was trying to rescue it from the men who twisted it into a weapon. She believed transformation wasn't betrayal, it was recovery. That going back to Christianity's radical origins meant dismantling the empire that co opted it. Rosemary Radford Ruther died in 2022 at age 85. By then, she'd published over 40 books and influenced generations of scholars, activists, and religious leaders. Every woman in a pulpit today owes something to Rosemary. Every person demanding that religious institutions live up to their own ideals is standing on ground she cleared. She turned theology into a tool for liberation. She proved that the most faithful act is sometimes refusing to accept what you've been told faith demands. For 2,000 years, the church said God ordained male dominance. Rosemary dug through the archives and found the receipts proving they'd made it up. She didn't ask permission to challenge church authority. She didn't wait for male scholars to validate her research. She looked at centuries of women erased from Christian history and said, I see you, and I'm going to make sure everyone else does too. Then she spent 60 years making institutional Christianity deeply uncomfortable by asking one simple question. If your theology justifies oppression, is it actually theology or just power dressed up as divine will? The church still hasn't answered that question honestly, but millions of people, women in ministry, environmental activists, liberation theologians, anyone fighting religious justifications for injustice, carry Rosemary's work forward. She proved that sacred texts can be tools of liberation or weapons of oppression, depending on who's interpreting them. And she made damn sure that women, the poor, the marginalized, and the earth itself had a theologian willing to interpret scripture on their behalf. The church said women should be silent. Rosemary spent 60 years proving that some voices are too important to silence, and the echoes of her scholarship are still shaking the foundations of institutional religion. Each and every one of you here is bringing something inside of you that is asking to be expressed. And it may go against the order of which you have been told. Good. It's by design that way. The pearl inside to be made of, like, what is it, a clam? The pearl takes that irritation, right, of sand over time to create a pearl. We don't just wake up with a pearl. This is also part of how we get to be in that co-creative space, asking, here's what I want to bring, and then looking for the ways that our soul feels expanded to bring it. What feels like the medicine that you need? What feels like the medicine that you desire to bring? Because each and every one of you are inside of industries and infrastructures that need the commitment and the stamina and the power that you bring. Because make no mistake, each and every woman listening, and I know we have some men, but really and truly, women, I want you to hear me say, you are powerful. Your DNA, the very thing that created you, that lives inside of you, is here to bring a different way. It is here to bring in and usher in love and healing just the way that you are. So be you. Dance, play, marvel, rest, be upset, get angry. Let your rage lead you home. Let your internal fire that is picking up, that is drawing you closer, really and truly fuel the things that you want to bring. And you still have to tend that fire. It still means rest. Um, I'm still feeling like a lot of us are feeling the heaviness of this moment. That's okay. Rest, but rest in also knowing that you are here to bring healing just the way that you are, just the way that you be. That medicine of who you are at your most authentic self is always, always dancing with the frequency around you. We are elevating it, we change it, we bring in proximity and contact more love, the more that we just simply allow our hearts to live and be and breathe just as we are craving, just as we are craving. All right. I also found a deck this week of one of my favorite decks that I've been missing. I found it in juxtaposition with a keychain that I had been asking to find. And so today, this is from the Earth Magic Oracle deck, and we have Winter Solstice Reflection is our card. This midpoint of winter is not only the shortest day of the year, but also the longest night. The world is very still and the land dormant. Various festivals of light are celebrated and have been for thousands of years, serving as a reminder that the light will indeed return. Throughout many cultures, there are tales describing this time as the birth of the archetypal Sun King, including the Christian story of Jesus' birth, representing the hope of renewal from the darkest period of the solar cycle. This image portrays a simple yet powerful representation of the winter solstice. We see a clear reflection of the snowy woods on the still frozen waters of the lake. The blue tint drapes the scene with an even greater sense of quiet and solace, inviting us to walk very softly, lest we disturb the intense yet gentle grace of this scene. The reflection of the trees on the frozen lake reminds us that it's time for us to go inside to both our physical shelter as well as our internal world, and there contemplate the season that has passed, the season that is, and the seasons yet to come. Review the past year and ask yourself, what the most important lessons you have had to learn are? What have you accomplished? What dreams and visions do you want to manifest in the upcoming year? Whether it has been a relatively smooth ride or a challenging series of events, acknowledge your experience as being the work of Source. No matter what your judgments, fears, or joys are, honor whatever has happened over the previous several months with gratitude and forgiveness. Then let it go. Allow yourself some solitude so you can spend some quiet, slow time in reflection. Once you feel complete, reflect on your present life, especially focusing on what you are grateful for. When you are finished, consider what is to come, all the different possibilities and potential that exists before you. Allow your imagination to roam without limitation or ambition and see what shows up. Notice how you feel in your body with whatever scenario plays out in your mind. These are previews of that which is gestating and can manifest and grow when cared for properly. Patience and stillness is called for here, for just as the earth cycles have their own pace, so does the cycle. Um, I really like this line to allow your imagination to roam without limitation or ambition. What I believe that means is without limitation, without knowing what something will cost, without knowing if we'd have the loan. It always usually comes back to money when I lean into some of these things. So much of our decisions are also so affected by our limit. So if you can, when you start leaning in and really thinking about the things that you want to bring, when you think about the way you want to bring it, try to release any limit. Even when it comes up, let that be what it is. Continue dreaming forward. We have no idea the ways that we could find abundance or be provided for. And if we look back over our life, I'm sure we will see so many different random ways that the universe, that God, that the divine has provided for us and will continue doing that. And I believe that when we follow that expansion, more of the abundance comes in and in more unique ways. Because when we stop agreeing to so much of our fear-based systems, because so much of our life is actually made, or so many decisions in our life, I believe, are actually made from fear, from what we don't want, from the fear of what could happen, instead of the possibility of what could happen, instead of the expansion of going, this feels a little risky, but I'm going to trust that this may work and pan out. I may not know how that bill is going to be paid. Let's see what happens. Let's see what we could invite. I had a business coach once who encouraged us to, when we were coming up against some of those limits, to list out every single way that we thought that that limitation could be met. Again, often financial for many of us because we were building businesses. So on top of that, listing out what we could imagine or ways that money had flowed to us or abundance had come to us. And then also, in addition to that, what are some ways that the universe could surprise you? So leaning into the possibility in the moment. And the other thing, without ambition, meaning without craving that the belief or need to have that hierarchical thing, because again, so much of that ambition we learned and we were taught, and most of that isn't actually ours. Most of us really just have an ambition to live in the fullest capacity that we are, to be ourselves, to have food, to have shelter, and to be living in a community where we take care of one another. And that doesn't seem to me like something that feels like a stretch, yet we are inside of so many systems that do not honor that. So each and every time that you're leaning into this, pay attention where those limits come up and lean more into the possibility and less around, again, things that we've learned to inherit. But you are, without a doubt, so weird, and that is your destiny. Let that be the beacon that pulls you forward. Follow your weird, follow your instinct, follow these quiet reflections of what you want to bring, and let yourself just continue blooming in the way that you crave. We need you just to be your weird little self. I'll see you next week.